everybody. This is the August 18th, 2026 Volusia-Flagler TPO TCC meeting. Go ahead and get started. Can we get a roll call, please?
Adrian Calderon, Brian Woodward, Gwen Hershey, Stephen Bath,
Here.
Chris Carson, Matthew West, Preshta Somji, Rena Talley,
Yeah.
Bill Freeman,
Here.
Simone Kenny,
Here.
Roy Seeger, Lisa Davina,
Here.
Jonathan Ward, Sebastian,
Here.
Daniel Nicholas, Trevor Martin, Brian Walker, Joshua Steele, Lee Yvette, Shane Corbin,
Here.
Joe Ruiz,
Here.
Noah Long, Jose Papa,
Here.
Mark Barrett,
Here.
Bonnie Slotnick is online. Tim Burton.
Here.
Becky Whitty. Here. Omar Atala. Bob Hessler.
Here.
Jeff Zink. Chuck Coppernell.
Here.
We have a physical form.
Thank you. And if you'll join me for Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which
One nation, under God.
with liberty.
And can I get a motion to allow virtual attendance? To approve. Becky Whitty.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Are there any members of the public wishing to make public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to our action items. Item 3A, review and approval of the June 16th, 2026 TCC meeting minutes.
So move. Second.
Second from Brian Woodsworth. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 3B, review and recommend approval of a resolution amending the 2026-27 to 2030-31 Transportation Improvement Program to incorporate roll forward project report.
So this is our annual roll forward amendment to our TIP. You may recall we adopted our TIP in June. It became effective July 1. But what happens is once we start our new TIP, DOT looks at their program of projects that were in the fiscal year 26. And some of those projects have to roll forward or carry forward into fiscal year 27. That is not known at the time we're developing our TIP. So we have to come back in August or September, sometime before the start of the federal fiscal year, and amend our TIP that we just adopted to add those projects back in. So these are projects that were in our previous TIP in fiscal year 26. But some of the funds need to roll and move into fiscal year 27. So this is the official action to add those projects back in. They automatically roll forward in DOT's STIP, which is the state TIP, but we have to do a formal amendment to add them back into ours. So in the agenda packet, we do receive a report from FDOT. So there's a link to the full report that we received, but then we've also in the agenda packet included a summary of the projects, which projects have funds, which phases of those projects, and the dollar amount that would roll forward into fiscal year 27. Most of the projects are DOT managed projects. There are a few projects that are member government projects moving forward, and those are indicated by the responsible agency column, which is column 3 in the table. But if there's any questions or comments, I'd be happy to address those. We also have representation from DOT here if there's any other questions I can answer as well. Otherwise, we'd be looking for a recommendation for approval.
I recommend we approve.
Second. All those in favor? Oh, roll call vote, please.
Brian Woodward,
Yeah.
Steve Bell, Chris Carson,
Yes.
Wes,
Yes.
Delaney Natali,
Yes.
Bill Freeman, Simone Kenny,
Yes.
Lisa Davina.
Yes.
Hamid Sebastian,
Yes.
Gene Corbin,
Yes.
Joe Ruiz,
Yes.
Noel Eaton,
Yes.
Jose Papa,
Yes.
Mark Corret,
Yes.
Bonnie Slotnick,
Yes.
Tim Berman, Becky Whitty, Ralph Hessler,
Yes.
Jeff Zink.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Item
This is DeBerry, Stephen Bath. It's a yes.
Thank you.
Resolution amending the fiscal year 2026-27 to fiscal year 2027-28 Unified Planning Board.
So this amendment to our UPWP is to add an activity in our transit task. It was an activity that we had budgeted for, but we failed to list it as a deliverable. And we are currently working with Votran on this particular activity. And it's major updates to their transit development plan and transportation disadvantage service plan. So it was an oversight by the TPO part to leave it out of the list of deliverables. Again, we did budget for it, and in June, our board did approve an authorization for an expenditure to assist with funding. Votran is also receiving funding through FTA, and in order for them to spend the money from FTA, it has to be listed as an activity. So it's really kind of to correct an error, but because it is a work product and a deliverable, it does require a formal amendment to our UPWP. But again, it's just to add an activity that we had already budgeted for, but just inadvertently left it off the list of transit activities that we are doing. If there's any questions or comments, I'd be happy to address that. Otherwise, looking for a recommendation for approval.
Make a motion to approve. Second.
A motion to approve in a second. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
Matthew West,
Yes.
Delaney Natali.
Yes.
Simone Kenny,
Yes.
Lisa Davina. Hamid Sebastian, Gene Corbin,
Yes.
Joe Ruiz,
Yes.
Noel Eaton,
Yes.
Jose Papa, Mark Corret,
Yes.
Bonnie Slotnick,
Yes.
Tim Berman,
Yes.
Becky Whitty.
Yes.
Ralph Hessler.
Yes.
Jeff Zink. Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our presentations and discussion items. Item 4A, TPO 101, plans, programs, and member responsibility.
Yes, thank you. So every couple of years, we like to bring a presentation to our committees. We have a number of new members, not just on this committee, but also on our CAC or BPAC. Just really to talk about the TPO, what we do here, what is our role in transportation planning, and some of the projects and products that you're going to be seeing coming before you for review and for recommendation over the next fiscal year. But just to get into it, like the role of the Volusia TPO and why we exist. So we are required to exist by federal and state law for urbanized area with a population of greater than 50,000. Can you advance the slide? Thank you. So any urbanized area is defined by the census that has a population greater than 50,000 has to have an agency like ours in order to expend federal and state dollars on transportation improvements. So the statute does refer to the organizations as MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, but you can also be called TPOs, Transportation Planning Organization, TPA. It's all interchangeable. But so sometimes you hear me talk about MPOs, I'm talking about us if I refer to it. That's just how it's referenced in the statute. But the role of the TPO really is to provide that local input for the prioritization of projects. So we do work with all of our member governments. We work with community stakeholders, citizens, and it's really, they call it the 3C process, which is continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive planning. But again, ultimately is to identify what our local priorities are and then convey that information to the Florida Department of Transportation for funding and selection of funding for our projects. So we are required to exist, as I mentioned, by both federal and state law. So this, if anyone's interested, this is, you know, the reference to the federal law, and it really contains most of the authority, responsibilities for MPOs and TPOs. And I mentioned urbanized areas greater than 50,000 population must have an agency like ours. We do have two separate urbanized areas as defined by the census. We have one that runs along the east coast of both Volusia and Flagler County, pretty much all the way from Oak Hill up through Marineland in Flagler County, and it actually extends just a little bit into St. Johns County. And then we have the urbanized area on the west side of Volusia County that covers the Deltona, DeBerry, DeLand, Orange City, Lake Helen area, which is a separate urbanized area. Both of the urbanized areas exceed a population of 200,000 persons. So that kind of throws us into a different category. So we're considered a transportation management area. And pretty much what that means is it does qualify for additional funding. You know, I do talk about SU funding and how we apply the SU funding. Well, that's where that comes from. So because we have two urbanized areas, we actually receive allocation, and it's formula based on population. So we do receive allocation, SU allocation for both of those urbanized areas. And then from the state law, this is the statute from the state law statute is 339.175 that talks about MPOs, but it really then digs into a little bit more the membership of the MPO. It identifies what our required work programs are, and then also establishes the authority and the responsibility. A lot of people ask about our funding and how the TPO is funded, how we receive our funding. So predominantly we are federally funded. So all of our operations at the TPO, most of it, I would say probably between 90 and 95% comes from federal funds. So the federal funds come to us through the Federal Highway Trust Fund, and they're allocated through FDOT. So we work with FDOT every month, submit invoice packages for reimbursement. We do operate off of reimbursement, so we have to front the money, and we carry our expenses for probably around 3 months before everything goes through and we get reimbursed through that program. So those funds come to us. Again, they're based on a formula. And it's based off of the surface transportation bill. So the current one that we're operating under is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that was signed into law in November of 2021. But it is set to expire September 30th of this year. So currently moving its way is the proposed reauthorization bill, which is called the Build America 250 Act. So this would reauthorize funds for highways, transit, freight, rail, safety, so all of the surface transportation for fiscal years 27 through 2031. And again, the federal fiscal year does start October 1. So we've been monitoring and working with some of the national agencies and organizations that have been evaluating this bill. But once it is signed into law, similar to when the IIJA was signed into law, we'll bring some information back through our committees and board about funding opportunities. You know, the IIJA had a lot of funding, discretionary funding opportunities. We don't see as much of that in the new bill, but we'll be bringing back some of that information to both our committees and our board for informational purposes. And then also we do receive a portion of our funds is state funding, and that supports our transportation disadvantage program. So we do work with VOTRAN on the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board. They meet quarterly. And the membership on that board is dictated by statute, but we do receive some funds from the states in order to administer that program alongside VOTRAM. And then we also have our local assessments. You may recall that we do assess our local governments 10 cents per capita. And what those funds do is they support activities at the TPO level that are not eligible for federal reimbursement. So there's a number of activities we do, and some of them are on our public outreach side, which you may think that they would be eligible for reimbursement, but they aren't necessarily always reimbursable. So we do have some local funds that can support those programs, like our helmet fitting program, or whenever we go out to events. Anything that we have that has Volusia-Flagler TPO is considered a marketing item, and that is not eligible for reimbursement. So that's why a lot of our outreach activities are not, we have to use local funds for those, but that helps offset some of our programming and keeps it balanced and allows us to do a lot of that outreach event. So many of you are aware of the structure of the TPO board. So we have a governing board that's made up of elected officials from each jurisdiction within the 2-county area. With underneath that governing board, there's a number of advisory committees. There's an executive committee, which is a 7-member subset of the governing board, and they meet separately to talk a little bit more in depth about items or issues, and then bring them before the governing board. They do have some limited authority on budgets and some other areas. There has been instances in recent years where the governing board has delegated authority to the executive committee. A good example of that is when we were relocating the executive committee with regard to negotiating the lease, build out of the space, expenditures associated with that was delegated to the executive committee rather than having to go to the full board for that. Of course, we have our technical coordinating committee made up of technical staff members from each of the local jurisdictions. We have 2 citizens committees, a citizens advisory committee and a bike ped advisory committee. These citizens are appointed by the board members that sit on the TPO board. And then I mentioned the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board. We do have a number of core documents. A lot of these you've seen recently. So the TPO runs kind of on cycles. So we have like an annual cycle, a 2-year cycle, and a 5-year cycle of a lot of our documents moving forward. But everything that we do here at the TPO is rooted in our long-range transportation plan. And we just adopted our most recent plan September of 2025. And so we update that every 5 years. But it takes a little bit of time to update. So probably within about 3 years, we'll start looking at developing our 2055 plan. But the long-range transportation plan identifies projects that we are undertaking, our large capacity style projects, such as the interstates or on the state roadways. And it also specifies funds that are boxed and that we use for other programs, such as our set aside, our bike ped program, our traffic operations program. Our TIP, or our Transportation Improvement Program, that is the 5-year programming of funds. So it's funds that are committed on projects over the next 5 years. We do update that every year. And the most recent one was adopted and went into effect July 1, and that's what we just amended to add those roll forward projects back in. Then we also do our list of priority projects. And this is where we are able to convey to the Department of Transportation what our project priorities are. So then when they're moving into development of the work program, they're able to identify what those priorities are and try to match those with funding resources moving along. Our Unified Planning Work Program, that is our 2-year program of projects and activities that we undertake at the TPO level. We just adopted and started our new UPWP on July 1. And so couple slides here. I'm going to talk about some of the projects and some of the deliverables, the planning projects that we're going to work on through there. And then we also have our public participation plan. And so this identifies and documents how we involve the public and how they participate in the planning process here. We do work with a number of partners across the 2 county areas. So of course, we're made up of the local jurisdictions. So we work closely with elected officials, staff members, as well as citizens, private interest groups, state agencies, federal agencies. So we kind of work and it's a partnership between all of us in order to plan and program projects within our community. And many of you are very well aware of the life cycle of a project. So one of the questions that we get often is why does it take so long, to build projects or move them along? And so, from planning all the way to the construction phase, you can look at anywhere from 10 to 15 years, depending on the type of project and the scope and the scale of the project. But this just provides a little bit information of what's happening at each step. Not every project has every phase incorporated into it, but many of them do, especially the larger projects that come out of our long-range transportation plan. And then what we're looking at or working on doing, when we start a new fiscal year, is we kind of look at our UPWP, which identifies deliverables. So most of what we've identified here under the first bullet are deliverables in our UPWP. Most of them we use consultant or pass-through funds for, and it's really supported by the monies that we deobligated from our prior UPWP. So you may recall that deobligating funds from our prior UPWP are funds that were identified that we weren't going to spend down before the end of that fiscal year. We pulled them out of that UPWP and deobligated for use in our new UPWP. So these funds won't actually be available to us until after the start of the federal fiscal year, which is October 1. So a lot of these activities are going to occur October 1 or after. Because of that reason, because our deobligated funds are what we use to support our consultant and pass-through activities. But we, as you know, we do conduct feasibility studies for local governments in both the bike ped and traffic operations programs. So we are currently working on developing a schedule of which projects are going to be able to move forward, October 1, which projects may move forward a little bit later in the year, but we're currently working on that. An update to the TIA guidelines. This comes up often. I know you all use the TIA guidelines when local developers come and want to, submit for application. About 10 or 12-ish years ago, before I was on the TPO, the TPO did develop a series of guidelines that were consistent across the 2 county area, because up until that time, we had local governments that were analyzing impacts differently. Some were looking at peak hour 2-way, some of them were looking at daily, some of them had maybe a 10-mile radius, 5-mile radius. So the TPO during that time developed a set of guidelines that every jurisdiction could use that was consistent. So when you're looking at the impacts of development and you have a neighboring city, you're all looking at it the same way. Well, it's been a while since those guidelines were updated or reevaluated. They don't deal anything with technology. There's a lack on some of the transit side for some of the requirements for there. So it's really to look at what's there, what needs to be changed. But that is an activity that we've identified to occur within the first fiscal year and like the first half of the first fiscal year. The other bigger project that was talked about in all of our committees as well as the board when we were developing our UPWP was an e-bike study. So what exactly that looks like, we're still working on, kind of working through what a scope would be. But I know there has been discussion amongst our executive committee to also look at an education piece within that study, whether there's some type of an educational program on the use of e-bikes, whether that happens at the school level. I know there are some other MPOs throughout the state that are doing pilot programs or pilot projects. So we would look at doing something similar, but We have not developed that scope yet, but that is something definitely that had a lot of interest from all of our committees as well as the board. We'll also continue our work with Bike Walk Central Florida and their programs. We just amended into our UPWP the updates to the TDP and TDSP. And then also an update to our congestion management performance measures report. Typically, we do this every 5 years after we adopt our long-range transportation plan. So again, all of those activities kind of fall under our consultant pass-through category, which we'll look at starting after the federal fiscal year and once we get authorized to spend down those de-obligated funds that we have identified. Additionally, we have updates to a number of our administrative documents and also our TPO websites. We will be working this fall on the development of the fiscal year 28 to 32 FDOT work program, and then that ultimately rolls into our TIP next year. And those projects come out of our priority list. Every year we do a certification with DOT, and because we are a TMA, TPO, every 4 years we have to do a federal certification, and that's coming up. It's usually in May or June of 27. The last time we had it done was 23. So that'll be something that's coming up, but that's a large effort to put forward. There is a component of that as a public outreach component as well. So you'll be seeing stuff about the federal certification sometime in the spring of next year. But so those are some of the activities that we're looking at coming up. So you'll be seeing these come before you, whether they're studies to review, scopes to provide input to. Definitely update the TIA guidelines. You are the ones that use those guidelines. So we would definitely want to make sure that we get review and input from the end users of those products as well. So it's kind of the next year that we have coming up. So if there's any questions or comments about the TPO, what we do, our role, or any of the upcoming activities, I'd be happy to address those.
I just want to say, really appreciate this overview. It shows all the work and efforts that you got, and from what I see, seeing on the schedule, all these meetings, updates, everything that is going on here with the, typically a lean staff that we all got, and really a lot going on, even though, we are not compared to Orlando or other MPOs, TPOs, and, relatively smaller, organization, but still all of these documents and updates and coordination. Just want to say from what I see, what a great job you do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm supported by a very great staff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Colleen. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to item 4B, which is our FDOT report.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Chuck Copperell with the FPO. I'll say that I'm going to be overseeing Volusia-Flagler MPO from this moment on. Now that Kaya has moved on to a different career path, so I'll get to know everybody as we go along. But I'm happy to help you with anything you need. So first off, I just want to mention that firm dates are now set for the construction of the westbound truck parking lot on September the 1st, and then the eastbound lot here will begin on October the 1st. If anyone is having difficulty orienting where we are here, we went up about probably about another ½ inch on the top. You'd see the off ramp that takes you over to US 92 from I-4. So we're just south of that. That's where that project's. Next, please. As of July 1st, the resurface through Bunnell and Palm Coast on US 1 has officially received their final acceptance, and it's now complete as well. Okay, next, please. Okay, as we step into August, our local children are saying goodbye to summer and heading back to school. So this is the moment that calls on all of us to slow down, especially staying vigilant in the school zones and watching out for the crossing guards, crossing the children, and watching out for those lights on the school bus. Protecting our kids require complete focus. And please remember that all text messages can wait. Never drive distracted and never drive impaired. This message also aligns with the National Stop on Red Week, since every single day across the country, motorists running red lights cause an average of 3 fatal crashes and 386 serious injuries. Next slide, please. FDOT has been thrilled to help bring history directly to our communities as part of the Governor's America 250 FL campaign. The Florida Freedom Tour between May and August, 2 massive 18-wheelers outfitted with state-of-the-art mobile museums traveled across all 67 Florida counties, bringing rich exhibits from the Museum of Florida History straight to the doorsteps of District 5 and District 7 and throughout the state. Proudly hosted and within Central Florida, District 5 and District 7 proudly hosted these stops throughout the Central Florida. And also on June 18th, we officially broke ground on the Seminole County truck parking facility. The very first of 5 scheduled facilities across Seminole, Volusia, Osceola, and Orange County. This initiative dramatically enhances corridor safety by offering professional drivers a dedicated place to rest by providing over 900 new parking spots for truck drivers once complete. Madam Chair, that completes my report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, and then we'll move on to item 4C, which is our Volusia County and Flagler County construction reports, which are included in your packet. If anybody has any questions or comments. If not, we'll move on to item 5, which is staff comments.
So I just have one comment. DOT is currently updating their Central Florida Regional Planning Model. And as part of the updates, they have developed their 2025 base year SE data, and they're asking for comments. And I previously, I think in July, had sent out a link, and I'll resend it out so we can get comments for our area. So basically what they're looking at in some of the comments, and some things that I have seen in the model is under different TAZs, a TAZ that I know is all residential. If maybe there's some commercial uses or industrial, the comment would be please reevaluate industrial allocation within this TAZ. You don't have to, specifically do the analysis and tell them what exactly needs to be in there in terms of the number of residential units. But if something just seems off, so currently we don't have any comments in the Volusia-Flagler area. And again, this is a 9-county model that ultimately will be used for the traffic impact analysis and the studies that are done. But the data that they look for, there's the residential data, there's non-residential, there's school enrollment population within each TAZ. If you have any questions, again, DOT is leading this effort through a consultant. We can put you in contact with the right person. They do have some documentation that they've provided, a data dictionary, as well as how to provide comments. It's similar to what they've done in the past. There's a dashboard. So it's as simple as going in and just clicking on the specific TAZ and writing a comment. But they're also open to receiving comments in other formats if that's something that you have. But this is something that's important that we make sure that we're able to review and provide comments, because ultimately this will feed into their model. And as I mentioned, I'll resend out the link so it's fresh in everyone's agenda or in everyone's inbox.
So just to clarify, they didn't have one set of comments and this is a revision that you're gonna send us a link to. This is from the original initial model. Because we had, the city had LTG look at the proposed SE data. And we had a conference call with DOT about it.
And this was a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
Right. So there was an issue with the development of that model and some of the data was not matching up. So they've kind of taken a step back and they've, gone through and are truing up some of the data through other sources. So this is their first stab at it. So what I would recommend if you've provided comments in the past is take a look at those comments and see if they're reflected in the new TAZ structure. So the TAZ structure hasn't changed. So if you made a comment on TAZ 2150 or whatever, then that TAZ is still the same TAZ. So
And so we're just looking at for possible like inconsistencies that we might see in our local jurisdictions, not necessarily verifying the data that's in there.
right, so you would be looking at, so it's the base year model. So what was on the ground in 2025. So if you have an area within your jurisdiction that you know is 100% residential and they have commercial or non-residential uses, whether it be commercial service or industrial coded in there, you don't need to go in and specifically state there's, 1 million square feet of, unless you know that, but just please take a look. This is a residential zone, but there's non-residential coded as well. And, each city and your TAZs, I know you all are familiar with the model. But each TAZ covers, a bigger area. So it's not as daunting, I think, as looking at the entire model if you just focus on specifically your jurisdiction and what's happening in Ormond. And again, it's what would have been on the ground in 2025. So what they're trying to do is set the base year model and have it as accurate as possible. So then they can start developing the future year scenarios.
There are no other questions or comments. You have item 7. You have information items in the back of your packet. If you have any questions or comments on those. If not, I will take a motion to adjourn. Thank you.